yesterday we talked about, we started talking specifically about the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, and I was mentioning that each aspect counteracts a wrong conception. And so there's 4 wrong conceptions about each of the 4 truths. Okay? So you'll also recall yesterday when, for example, when we were talking about true sufferings or true dukkha, that included 4 things, the aggregates, the body, the mind, the environment, and then the resources, right? Okay, so each of these, we have 4 misconceptions regarding these, okay? So the first one we talked about yesterday was that they're permanent. Yeah, so we talked, a lot about thinking that that our body was permanent and not aging, not going towards death, that our environment, our resources, the things we use are also permanent and unchanging, and so that's why we're surprised when they change and kind of shocked and wondering how that could happen. Okay, then the second one, okay, so the first one, let's go back, I'll just read the sentence that encapsulates it. Phenomena such as the physical and mental aggregates are impermanent. Okay, why? Because they undergo continuous momentary arising and disintegration. Okay, so they're changing moment by moment. Then the second one is the aggregates are unsatisfactory in nature. In other words, they're dukkha in nature because they're under the control of afflictions and karma. Okay, when we say afflictions, it includes ignorance. Sometimes I point out ignorance specifically by saying ignorance, afflictions, and karma, but actually ignorance is an affliction. Okay, so the aggregates, especially our body and mind, are unsatisfactory because they are subject to 3 different types of dukkha. Okay, 3 different ways in which they're unsatisfactory. Okay, so I'll just list those and then explain them. So the first is the dukkha of pain, then the dukkha of change, and the pervasive conditioned dukkha. Okay, so the dukkha of pain refers to gross pain that any living being, no matter what realm they're born into, sees as pain. So physical pain, mental pain. Okay, we have lots of experience with those, right? And everybody doesn't like them. Everybody wants to get rid of them. We don't always know the skillful way to get rid of them. And sometimes in trying to get rid of them, we make them worse. Yeah, but everybody sees that as something unsatisfactory. The other 2 types of dukkha are more difficult to see as unsatisfactory, okay? But when we think about them, we will. The second one is the dukkha of change, and this is the fact that nothing in its very nature is pleasurable, okay? That even what we call pleasure is it's labeled in dependence upon a very small discomfort. Okay, so example, famous one. You're sitting down, your back hurts, your knees hurt, you want to get up and stand, Okay, so that's the dukkha of pain. When you first get up and stand, you go, oh, that feels good. Yeah, and so at that point, we call that pleasure. But if standing in and of itself were pleasurable, the longer we stood up, the happier we would be. But what happens? The longer you stand up, I want to sit down. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. So the pleasure that we felt at the beginning of standing up was actually the small discomfort from standing. As we stood longer and longer, that small discomfort grew bigger and bigger. And as it grew bigger and bigger, then we started calling it pain, even though it was the same continuity of that original, feeling, okay? So what this one really accentuates is that even what we think is pleasure, by its very nature is not pleasurable, because if we do it long enough, we want to get away. Okay, it becomes painful. This also emphasizes the point that anything external that we get is unable to give us any kind of lasting happiness or lasting security. Why? Because it changes into something uncomfortable as time goes on. Okay? So if you think of something, some kind of happiness you had in your life, the highest happiness you've had so far in this life, and imagine being with that person or doing that activity or being at that place for 1 month straight with no break doing anything else. Okay, so let's say it's lying on the beach with, this person you're madly in love with. So there you are, you're lying on the beach with this person you're madly in love with for 1 solid month. You don't go and do anything else. If this were true happiness, the longer you laid on the beach with this person, the happier you would become. Do you think you could make it a whole month lying on the beach next to them? Just think, no break. You got to be with them all the time and be on that beach all the time. And let's say you could even make the sunshine permanent. So you're in the sun 24/7 for a month. That should be the ultimate happiness, because you have everything you want for a month. That doesn't sound very enjoyable, does it? Okay?
In turn, do we conclude that true happiness is to maintain a constant state of change before we took over?
Well, that's the conclusion you draw when you can only think of the happiness of this life. When we only think of the happiness of this life, then it's true. Then we have to do everything up until the exact moment where it starts to get obviously painful, and then suddenly switch activities and hope that the person we're with and the environment and everything else wants to switch at the same exact moment that we do. Right? And that's what we've tried up until now. It's like, honey, I'm too hot in the sun, can we go in? No, I'm just beginning to get tan. I'm burning, can we go in? No, I want to go swimming again. Whatever it is, are you going to be able to set it up exactly? No. Or you land the perfect job. Do you think you're going to have pleasure at this job for exactly 8 hours every day? Well, nowadays it's more like 10. For exactly 10 hours every day? No bad days? that job's going to bring you everlasting happiness? Okay? So this is why we say samsara is the nature of, is unsatisfactory in nature. Nirvana, on the other hand, is not under the influence of afflictions and karma. So, nirvana, which is the cessation of dukkha and the origins of dukkha, is able to give us, lasting peace and happiness, because it's not dependent on external things. It's not dependent on our very fickle, changing mind. Because our mind really plays a big element in all this unsatisfactoriness and, being fed up with something, doesn't it? One day, oh, this is marvelous. Venerable Yeshe's chocolate chip cookies are wonderful. And then you eat them for a week. Oh. Okay. So, external things are not going to do it for us. So the kind of happiness that comes through Dharma practice is an internal kind of happiness that doesn't rely on getting the external things we want or getting away from the external things we don't want. So this kind of happiness that comes through eliminating the afflictions and the karma that causes rebirth, is a much more stable kind of happiness, because it's something internal that's not fluctuating according to the winds of karma, So right now we don't have a lot of experience with that internal happiness. But as we practice more and more, we begin to see, oh, if I change my mind, I can be happy. If I don't change my mind, I'm not going to be happy. Have you ever been in the most beautiful external situation? Everything's exactly as you want it, and you're miserable? There you are on the beach with the perfect person. And you just had a fight. Or maybe you didn't have a fight, but you're just feeling bleh, uncontrollably bleh. Are there some days when you just feel bleh? Okay. So there you are in the situation where you should be like, wow, writing on your Facebook. Instead of experiencing the happiness, telling everybody how happy you are. Yes, taking a selfie. Yes, so I can remember this time because I never experienced it because I was too busy writing about it and taking pictures of it. Okay? But you begin to see that if we change the mind, then we can be happy anywhere. So, sometimes you meet people who have been through extraordinarily difficult events in their life, and they're fine. They're fine. They're not freaked out. They're not bummed out. They're not hysterical. They're not depressed. They've been through difficulty, but because they've been able to work with the inner mind, then they can manage during these difficult situations. Okay? Whereas if we don't have a strong practice, then even the slightest bit of discomfort, and we just crumble. We can't stand it. True or not true? When our mind is just, when the afflictions are overpowering and we don't have any, our Dharma practice is very weak, then the slightest little thing, and we get totally bummed out for a long time sometimes. Whereas when we have a strong practice, we go through the internal transformation, then the external situation is not experienced as so awful. Okay? And people can actually grow during those difficulties. Okay? So this is why Dharma practice is important, because without it, we just fall back on all of our old habits. And, I don't know about your old habits, but my old habits aren't any fun. Okay? Then the third kind of dukkha is called pervasive conditioning dukkha. And what this means, or conditioning, or you could say conditioned dukkha, it's both. It conditions and it is conditioned. But this refers to just having the 5 aggregates that we have, a body and mind under the influence of afflictions and karma, because just having that is an unsatisfactory state. Yeah? So even we're not experiencing gross misery at this particular time, we are walking on the edge of a cliff, whereby with the slightest change of condition, plunk, we go over. Okay? So you can look at people, and you may have had it in your own life, like everything is great in your life, and then someone gets in a car accident. Yeah. And that wasn't supposed to happen. That wasn't on my life plan. It wasn't on my agenda today. That kind of thing happens for other people, not for me. Yeah. And plunk, you go over the cliff into outright suffering. Yeah. But even before the car accident, when you thought you were happy, that happiness wasn't secure happiness, because our body and mind are still under the influence of afflictions and karma. So you're walking right on the edge of that cliff. Yeah? As long as the good karma is ripening, you're on top of the cliff. As soon as there's some change in circumstance, boing, into, obvious pain. Okay? So we say that state of just having a body and mind that are susceptible to pain like that's unsatisfactory. Okay? So those are the 3 ways, the 3 kinds of things being unsatisfactory. And when so how to deal with these things, okay? You could say, I'm so depressed. Yeah. Everything's unsatisfactory. There's pain. My happiness goes away. My whole situation sucks because I have a body and mind. Woe is me. This is terrible. I'm just going to lock myself in my room and eat cookies all day and try and be happy, or drink all day, or smoke all day, or read novels all day, or whatever it is you take refuge in when you're unhappy. Okay? And that doesn't work because you're still depressed. Okay, so do you think that's the mental state the Buddha's trying to cultivate in us by teaching this? I hope you say no. If you say yes, then I haven't explained it very well. Okay, so that's clearly not the state that the Buddha is trying to encourage in us. Yeah, why is the Buddha pointing this out? Because all of this big problem is something that is caused by afflictions and karma. Afflictions and karma are rooted in ignorance. Ignorance can be eliminated. There exists a state of peace beyond all these unsatisfactory conditions. There's a path to follow to get us to that state of peace. and the Buddha's saying, hey, you're in prison, the door's over there. Yeah, instead of banging your head on the prison wall, go out the door. Okay, Mitch just wrote me a beautiful story when he, do you want to tell the story? Yeah, okay.
We arrived a little bit late, I thought, for medicine being on Thursday. And I was nervous about it. I didn't know about the check-in. And I'm staying out in the barn room over there. And I hadn't been there before either. I didn't know about the barn. Started walking to try to check in on time. And I see this little bird in the barn flying against the window over and over again. But this bird, I've never seen a bird like this. Gold and blue and green. Maybe I'm colorblind, but I'd never seen a bird like this. But I was late for coming in, so I was torn. I didn't even know how to get in the barn or not allowed in the barn. Okay, so I abandoned all concern and go and try to save the bird. I think I'm opening the sliding window, banging his head against the window because he's kind of freaked out because now I'm right here. And I'm trying to move the window and it won't keep banging. And the window doesn't open. And finally I kind of push it to them. So the bird kind of wakes up and flies out the open door. Huge garage door the other way. I make it to the convention. Yeah. What's more important? And I realized it wasn't a bird. It was a bodhisattva reminding me, teaching me to stop banging my head against the same wall all the time.
Yeah.
And turn around, stop, look for the big open.
Yeah, there's the big open door. Yeah, turn around and fly out of it. Yeah. Okay, so that's what the Buddha is trying to teach us, by explaining this second quality of true dukkha. Okay, that there's a big open garage door. Fly out, stop banging yourself against the window. Yeah, okay, so that's, explaining this then, the Buddha is trying to help us generate a strong motivation for liberation. Yeah. In the meantime, from now until we attain liberation from all these states of dukkha, yeah, the more aware we are of how our own mind plays an active part in our experiences of pain, the more it gives us choice in situations to think in another way, to view the situation in another way, to stop our immediate suffering. So even if we can't, get out of cyclic, even if it's going to take us a while to eliminate all ignorance and get out of cyclic existence, still if we realize at any particular moment, I have the potential and the opportunity to change how I'm thinking. And if I do, this situation of discomfort or pain or suffering can change accordingly. Okay, so that gives us a lot of power in our lives, just by changing our minds. So we have to remember that. When we're sitting here, we go, oh yeah, change my mind. As soon as somebody does something we don't like, we forget that. And instead of saying, oh, I can change my mind, we say, something's wrong with the world, something's wrong with me, everything's horrible, and we go back into our hole. Yeah, with the rockets shooting out of it. Okay? So, we have to remember this no matter what's going on. And then, when we study the Dharma, and this is why the Lamrim teachings, the teachings on the stages of the path, these teachings are so important, why the Lojong or thought training teachings are so important. Because if we learn these teachings and we do the Lam Rim and thought training meditations, then when we face difficulties, we are already familiar with the methods to practice, to change our perspective, to change our mind. Okay? If we don't do these meditations on a day-to-day basis, then when we have a problem, we don't know what to do. And even, all of a sudden, then you ask somebody, what do I do? And they tell you, because you haven't developed familiarity with these methods by thinking about them, very often in your daily practice, then at that time you're trying to use them, they feel uncomfortable because you're not well habituated. Okay? So the real trick is to learn these methods and then practice them in a consistent way. And when you do, when you need them, they're right there. And also because as you practice them, your view changes completely, so that you stop interpreting things in the same old, rotten, self-centered way. Okay? Because you're practicing seeing things in a different perspective. Okay? I just had something. There's a lot going on with my birth family. This is my family here. This is my home. But, with my physical family, there's a lot going on. My father just died and other stuff's happening. And, there was one day several explosions. And, and I was really surprised, I kind of sat there and I just watched, and my understanding was these people are stressed. Yeah, these people are in pain and they're stressed, and that's why they're doing this. And I didn't take any of what was said to me or what was going on in a personal way. Whereas years ago, you just look at me cross-eyed and I crumble, So, I say, oh, okay, something in my practice must be working because, I didn't react in the same way. Mm-hmm. Not that I enjoyed the situation. The whole thing was really quite sad and unnecessary. But, I realized, they are simply stressed. And, how much they mean what they say, I have no idea. Yeah. And it doesn't really matter if they mean what they say. It doesn't really matter because they're just stressed right now. Hmm? Okay. And the situation hasn't ended either. You should read my email this weekend. Maybe you shouldn't read my email this weekend. Yeah. So, So that third quality, the third wrong conception, was that painful things are pleasurable. Yeah. And the way out of it is to realize, no, dukkha is dukkha. Yeah. And we can mitigate it now by practicing the Dharma, and we can escape from the situation forever through really deepening our practice. Okay? Then the third misconception, okay, is that the aggregates are are attractive and beautiful, okay? Desirable. So that we usually focus on the body here, but it could include the mental aggregates as well. But we start off really focusing on the body. And so in our regular, our everyday mind, there's this whole thing of the body is beautiful, right? And the body is desirable, and the body is a source of pleasure, and it's attractive, and and especially in our society now, there's so much emphasis on the body and on pleasure from the body and the beauty of the body, and we use sex to sell everything. How you use sex to sell laundry soap is like beyond me, but they've invented a way to do it. Okay? So, this is all manipulating our mind, and creating more desire, but it's based on this view that we have that our body is really something far out, and other people's bodies are really something terrific, and there's that good-looking person who walked in the room, and wow, yeah, where's he doing walking meditation? I want to do my walking meditation nearby. Yeah, we'll bump into each other. Yeah. So, but what is the body really? Yeah, is the body really attractive? It's very true. As long as you don't think about it, the body is attractive. As soon as you think about it, okay, what's inside the body? All kinds of nice stuff, huh? Inside the body. Yeah? Some people, they look at the inside of the body and they faint. They're horrified. It's so atrocious, So here we are, with this body that actually is rather foul by nature, that we think is just gorgeous. Then you're going to say, well, like somebody did, but some parts of the body are nice, the skin, the hair, the eyes. What is it? Your eyes are like diamonds and your teeth are like pearls, and I don't know, whatever it is, okay? But let's say you take the person's body apart and you put their eyes there and you lay out their teeth here and you put their hair over there and you spread the skin across here. Those same body parts, are they gorgeous now? Yeah. They're, with the crash in the rebel-held area of Ukraine, 3 days later, they're just beginning to take some of the bodies out. Can you imagine what those bodies look like after 3 days in the summer heat? What they smell like after 3 days in the summer heat? And the people, when they got on the plane, they're all looking nice, and they're attractive, and their hair's combed, everything's beautiful. And now, some of the bodies are intact, bloated, smelly. Other ones, you are in different pieces. Are the pieces of the body beautiful? Not so, huh? Not so. So this is some kind of distortion in our way of seeing things, isn't it? That we think that this body is so beautiful and such a source of pleasure. It's not so beautiful. And at the end of the day, the body is the real thing that betrays us. You know? Okay? Yeah.
How do you stop from going in the opposite direction and kind of get to those people who have like the body hatred and like hurt themselves?
Right, okay. So how do you keep from going to the other extreme, that you hate your body and you hurt it and so on? Okay, first of all, the body is not inherently beautiful, but it's also not inherently atrocious either. But moreover, and most important, in this lifetime, our body is the basis of our precious human life. Yeah, and so this body is the basis upon which we can practice the Dharma. So it's extremely important that we take care of our body. Yeah, we keep our body clean. We keep our body healthy. Yeah, it's not an issue of hating our body. There's nothing to hate in the body. It's just the thing of let's be realistic about the body. Okay? So when we're at this extreme of overestimating the body, yeah, then we want to get to the middle point here of, okay, I have a body. It's not going to be the source of my everlasting pleasure. It's really kind of yucky. Everything that comes out of this body is yucky. Okay. And everything that comes out of other people's body is likewise yucky. So I'm not going to sit there and swoon over other people's bodies, because who wants a pile of yuck? Okay? However, yeah, this body is the basis of my precious human life. And in that way, it's extremely valuable. And so I need to take care of my body and use it wisely. Yeah, so that I can practice the path. Okay? And then when you do, you really take care of your body in a healthy way, because you start eating better. Instead of eating junk food, you eat well, because you realize, hey, if I eat junk food, yeah, and if I'm overweight, and if I get diabetes, and if, what other this stuff has, I'm going to shorten my own lifespan, and that is detrimentally going to affect my Dharma practice. And my Dharma practice is the most important thing in my life. So I need to keep my body fit, on the right weight, eat healthy food. Okay? And so we go about doing that. Okay? So that's not torturing the body, is it? Yeah. So the Buddha was very much against torturing, these extreme ascetic practices. Yeah, because that doesn't help. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are you saying, you didn't go into the subject, but are you saying that a committed couple communicate pleasure
What I'm not saying should and shouldn't, okay? I'm just explaining the teachings, and then people can understand them as they wish and apply them in their own lives as they wish. Okay? Okay, so then the third quality of true dukkhas, okay, the aggregates are empty, yeah, because they are not a permanent, unitary, and independent self. Now, you're going to wonder, wait a minute, how does that go against this idea of the body as foul? How does that counteract that? It isn't initially obvious, okay? So,
The body is pure.
yeah.
You said foul.
Oh.
The body is foul. The aspect.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. How does it counteract the body is foul? Okay. Yeah, that we think is pure. Okay, I mean, the distorted conception is is thinking it's pure. So how do we counteract thinking that it's pure and realize that it's actually foul? Okay, so this mistaken belief that the body is, that the foul body is something pure and clean, it is related to holding the person and the aggregates to be separate entities. Okay, so at the Buddha's time, people very strongly adhered to the caste system, whereby the people who in the higher caste thought their bodies were pure, and the people in the lower caste, and they thought the people in the lower caste had foul bodies, and so that's why they wouldn't touch them and they wouldn't come in contact with them and everything. Kind of like racism in America, okay, except it was casteism. But this whole idea that even somebody else's body is foul, whereas my body is pure. That's a big misconception, isn't it? All the bodies are made out of the same elements. Yeah, they all have livers and intestines and goo inside. It's not that my goo is pure and your goo isn't. Yeah, it's all equally, foul. Okay, so the people who believe, the higher classes, the Brahmins, who thought that their bodies were pure, back this up by a philosophical belief that everybody had an Atman, or a soul, that was independent, unitary, and permanent. It's usually the other, permanent, unitary, and independent. Independent here meaning not depending on causes and conditions. Okay? And so since the Atman was permanent, they said, well, we of the highest classes have permanent Atmans that are higher and better and purer than the lower caste Atmans who have these foul bodies, So our bodies are pure, our Atmans are pure, yours are not pure. And since it's permanent, our Atman is permanent, you can never become pure, I can never become impure, and all my kids are pure by birth. Okay, and so establish this whole rotten social system based on this wrong philosophy, based on our wrong conception that the body is pure. Okay, so the Buddha, by saying, hey, wait a minute, there's no Atman that is permanent, unitary, and independent, he completely shattered the basis, the basic philosophy for the caste system. Okay? And so in that way, we say that this third thing of, the aggregates are not a permanent, unitary, and independent person counteracts the third misconception of the body being pure. Okay? Yeah, it makes some sense that way, doesn't it? Yeah. And it's amazing how we develop whole social systems and how much people suffer because of wrong views and wrong philosophies, isn't it? You see, it's all just dependent on the mind, how people think. And even today, the caste system, as much as Mahatma Gandhi did to try and overcome it, it's still alive and well, and disastrous for people. Okay, then the fourth attribute. Okay, so the third one's the aggregates are empty because they're not a permanent, unitary, independent self. The fourth is the aggregates are selfless because they are not a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. Okay, so a self-sufficient, substantially existent self is this thing of a self being a controller, in control of the body and mind. Okay. So this explanation of the third one, empty, and the fourth one, selfless, the third one being the lack of permanent, unitary, independent self, the fourth one being the lack of a self-sufficient, a substantially existent, self-sufficient, substantially existent self. This is according to the general Buddhist explanation that is acceptable to almost all of the Buddhist schools. Okay. According to the Prasangika, the third and the fourth attributes, empty and selfless, actually have the same meaning, which is not just that the self is, not permanent, unitary, and independent, not self-sufficient, substantially existent, but that the persons and all other phenomena, including our body and mind, lack inherent existence. So for the Prasangika, what they're negating in the third and fourth attributes of true suffering is much, much deeper than the general thing that the other schools are negating, the commonly held view. Okay? Because it's one thing to negate a permanent self, because negating a permanent self, that idea of a permanent self is really gross. In fact, it's a gross in the sense of coarse. And in fact, it is, seeing the person as permanent it's not, how to say, no, seeing this image of an Atma, the way it's described, is actually just an acquired affliction. Okay? It's something that people made up by their own conception. Yeah? Whereas things being, the person and aggregates and everything else being inherently existent, this is an innate affliction. Yeah, that word that is inborn, that just is the fundamental ignorance. Okay, so you can see that, what's in common with all the schools is a much grosser level. Yeah, and so it's good to start out negating that and then progress to the deeper levels. But, to be aware that there are deeper objects of negation besides just a soul. Okay? So, those are the four attributes of true dukkha. We finished one. Okay, let's run through the others. Okay, so the four aspects of true origins. Okay, so the true origins are ignorance, afflictions, and karma. And like I explained yesterday, we often use craving as the example of true origins because of the function that craving plays during our life and also at the time of death to, cause rebirth again and again and again. Okay? So so the first aspect of true origins, craving and karma, okay? So craving, and here when it says karma, it means polluted karma created under the influence of ignorance. So craving and karma are causes of dukkha because due to them, dukkha constantly exists. Okay? So by contemplating this, we develop the deep conviction that all of our dukkha, all of our unsatisfactory conditions have causes. Okay? And craving and karma are these causes. Okay? And the result is the dukkha. So this refutes any idea that our misery is causeless, that it just happens without any kind of cause. Yeah. So this is helpful to remember, because sometimes when we experience suffering, we're so surprised. How did that happen? As if it didn't have a cause and came out of nowhere. Yeah. To realize, it did have a cause, craving and karma. And craving and karma can be eliminated. Okay, the second one, craving and karma are the origins of dukkha because they repeatedly produce all of the diverse forms of suffering or the diverse forms of dukkha. So afflictions and karma create not just a portion of our dukkha, but all of it. No matter which kind of dukkha, the three kinds of dukkha we're experiencing. And understanding this dispels the wrong conception that suffering comes from only one cause. Yeah, the other person, or God, or the devil. Yeah, all my suffering is caused by the devil. So. Well, actually, the devil is the next one, falls under the third attribute. But this one is, just saying that there's only one cause for our suffering. When actually, it has many, many causes. And then the third one is craving and karma are strong producers because they act forcefully to produce strong dukkha. So understanding this dispels the notion that dukkha arises from discordant causes. A discordant cause is something that doesn't have the ability to produce that particular result. So here's where the devil comes in, saying my suffering is due to the devil. Okay, can the devil cause your suffering? No. Okay, that's a discordant cause. Yeah. Can God's will cause your suffering? No. Okay. Can another sentient being, is another sentient being really the source of our misery? No. It all comes back to ignorance, craving, and karma, okay, which can be eliminated. And then the fourth one is craving and karmas are conditions because they also act as the cooperative conditions that give rise to dukkha. Okay, so this counteracts the idea that things are fundamentally permanent but temporarily fleeting. Okay, we've talked about this before. So if our dukkha were permanent and eternal, it could not be affected by other factors, and could not be counteracted. But craving and karma are not only the main causes of our dukkha, but they're also the cooperative conditions. Okay, because let's say we have from a previous life. Well, I'll tell you the story of my friend Teresa. This is a really good example. My first Dharma course in Lake Arrowhead, California, I sat next to a young woman named Teresa, and she had been to Kopan before, and so she was trying to convince me to go to Kopan Monastery in Nepal for the course there, and I thought the Dharma was pretty cool, so I decided to go. And she said, "Okay, when we get to Kopan, I'll take you out to Freak Street, and we'll have some chocolate cake there." Freak Street was where all the hippies went, all the freaks, all the hippies, and where they made Western food. So she said, "I'll take you out for some chocolate cake when we get to Kopan." So I get to Kopan, waiting, because Teresa's supposed to attend the course, and she hasn't arrived. And the first week of the course goes by, second week, Teresa hasn't arrived, and several of us who know her are really, really worried, concerned about what happened to her. And then we get the news. This was back in 1975, the autumn of 75. At that time, there was one French man in Bangkok who was a serial murderer. And Teresa met him at a party, He was very charming. He invited her out to lunch the next day. And then they found Teresa's body in a Bangkok canal. Yeah. So this story is a real good story about how the time of death is uncertain. But it's also a good story about how a craving and karma can be the conditions for the ripening of very strong dukkha. So Teresa had some strong karma on her mind stream, that could ripen in her being murdered. But it could ripen only if the cooperative conditions came together. Okay? She went to this party, met this man. What was the mental state of meeting somebody she was attracted to? Attachment, craving. Yeah. He asked her out for a meal. She accepted. They were going to have I'm sure he took her out for a very nice meal. Again, more attachment. So you see how that set up the condition for the ripening of that karma, ripening of that heavy karma. Okay? So it's kind of like driving under the influence, or doing anything under the influence. Okay? We could have some very heavy karma there. It hasn't ripened yet because the cooperative conditions aren't there. When you drink, when you smoke dope, when you misuse prescription drugs, you're setting up the external situation so that it becomes very easy for some negative karma to ripen. Yeah. So this doesn't mean that every time somebody has some heavy karma ripen, it's because they were under the influence of afflictions at that moment. It doesn't mean that. But it does mean that when we let our mind go under the influence of afflictions, it really helps the negative karma to ripen. Yeah. I mean, you drive under the influence, what are you setting yourself up for? Yeah. It's a setup for suffering, isn't it? Okay? I'll tell you another story about that. Many years ago, when I was teaching in a different state, somebody was driving me somewhere, and we had a long time to talk in the car, and she was telling me, I asked about her family, and she said that I can't remember how many kids she had, but one son had died. And then she told me the story of how her son died. Her husband had, liked to drink, and he saved all of his, whiskey bottles and wine bottles and everything. He was, how some people are kind of proud of drinking, and they save all their bottles, and he was like that. And so around their house, he had like this whole shelves of, samplings of all the different kind of alcohol bottles, representing all the different kind of alcohol that he had sampled, from very refined this to, whatever. Okay, so clearly the father drank a lot, so the son, followed in the father's footsteps and started drinking. So the son, one day, I think he must have been early 20s maybe, he caused an accident because he was under the influence. I think there were 3 or 4 people in the other vehicle who died because of the accident. And the son was very severely injured, and they had to put him on life support. And then the parents were faced after a while of him being on life support and not coming out of the coma, of what to do. Do they pull the plug or keep this person alive? Can you imagine being a parent forced to make that decision with your own child, whether to pull the plug or not? I mean, horrendous for the parents. And they decided to pull the plug, and their son died. And the father went home and looked at all of his alcohol bottles and just, because he realized that somehow his behavior had an influence in this whole thing. Yeah. So, So craving and karma are also conditions for very strong dukkha. Yeah. So this is why those of you who are going to take the 5 precepts, this is the value of the 5 precepts, and why the precepts are such a protection, because when you refrain from killing and stealing and unwise and unkind sexual behavior and lying and taking intoxicants, when you refrain from that, you are protecting yourself so much in many ways, because you're protecting yourself from doing the actions that could act as conditions for the ripening of negative karma. And you're also protecting yourself from doing the actions that create the negative karma that can ripen in different situations in your life or in what you're reborn as. So precepts become incredible protection. Okay. I got sidetracked a little bit. We still have 10 more minutes. But I'm hoping that, something strong is going in there. Yeah? Right.
What about the 10 non-virtues?
Well, the same thing. Yeah, same thing. As much as we, as much as we disengage from the 10 non-virtues, we protect ourselves from the ripening of other karma and from creating the karma that creates, direct misery. Yeah.
Seems to me that we stop ourselves from becoming a condition for others.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, you stop serving alcohol, you're not going to be the condition for somebody else getting drunk. Yeah. Yeah. And I think as parents, it's incredibly important the example that you set for a child, because children watch what you do, not what you say. Yeah. My mother used to say, "Do what I say, not what I do." Yeah. No. Sorry, Mom. That wasn't correct. So. Okay, so true cessation. So the example given for true cessation is true cessations, like I explained yesterday, are the different levels of the ceasing of, of afflictions, and therefore of the dukkha that they create. Okay, so here we're saying the first aspect is true cessation is the cessation of dukkha, because by being a state in which the origins of dukkha have been abandoned, it ensures that suffering or dukkha will no longer be produced. So understanding that attaining true cessation is possible by eliminating the continuity of afflictions and karma dispels the misconception that liberation does not exist. Okay, so that's very important, because if we think liberation doesn't exist, then we won't try and attain it. Okay. Then second, true cessation is peace, because it is a separation in which afflictions have been eliminated. Okay? So some people, instead of seeing the qualities of actual liberation, they mistake other afflicted states as liberation. Okay? So for example, some people attain the meditative stabilization, or the meditative absorptions in the form realm or the formless realm. These are very high states of meditative absorption. And because the mind is so peaceful in those states, they mistake them for being liberation. In fact, the person hasn't eliminated ignorance. They haven't realized emptiness. Yeah. So this is a really big boo-boo, to think that you've attained liberation when you haven't, because then, when that karma for that rebirth ends, plunk, they go down, into more unfortunate realms. Okay. Then third is true cessations are magnificent because they are the superior source of help and happiness. So because true cessations are completely non-deceptive and no other state of liberation supersedes it or is better than it, true cessations are magnificent. It's their total freedom from the three kinds of dukkha that we were talking about earlier. So again, this prevents mistaking certain states of partial or temporary cessation as final nirvana. Okay, so a person might think, okay, I've subdued my anger, that's liberation. Well, no, you still have ignorance. Yeah, and the anger hasn't been completely eradicated. Yeah, so this keeps us on our toes so that we really identify correctly what the source or origin of our dukkha is, and that we make sure we really practice the path entirely so we can attain actual true cessations instead of some inferior kind of, state that seems better than where we were before. And then fourth, true cessations are definite emergence because they are total irreversible release from samsara. So liberation, true cessation, is definite abandonment because it's irreversible. In other words, once you have attained actual true cessations, it's impossible to lose them. You never fall down again. Okay? So if we're, people who are looking for security, true cessations are the ultimate security. Yeah? Because they're states in which the causes of dukkha and the corresponding levels of dukkha have been eliminated so that they can never appear again, ever. Yeah, so that's real security. Financial security, forget about. You never attain financial security. No matter how much money you have, you never have financial security, do you? Yeah? No matter what situation you're in, yeah, there's never any lasting security except for true cessations. Okay, then, the four aspects of the path. So, in the Theravada tradition, the Pali tradition, they talk about the Eightfold Noble Path here as the example. From the Prasangika Madhyamaka system, we talk about it being the wisdom that realizes the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, and especially nirvana. Actually, that wisdom realizing the 16 aspects and especially nirvana is common to all of the Buddhist schools, but especially from Prasangika Madhyamaka view, it's the wisdom realizing the emptiness of inherent existence of both persons and phenomena. Okay, so this wisdom that, realizes the Four Noble Truths, especially realizing the nirvana, especially realizing emptiness, then this is the wisdom in the continuum of an Arya, okay? Because an Arya has realized the ultimate nature directly. So the first aspect is the wisdom directly realizing selflessness. Here, selflessness means emptiness from the Prasangika view. The wisdom directly realizing selflessness is the path because it is the unmistaken path to liberation. So this, knowing this counters the misconception that there's no path to liberation. So again, that's very important, an important misconception to counter, because if we think there's no path, or if we think there's no liberation, then we don't even set out on the practicing. Okay, so this wisdom leads us to the destination of liberation, or nirvana, or true cessations. 2, the wisdom directly realizing selflessness is awareness, because it acts as the direct counterforce to the afflictions. Okay, so the wisdom realizing selflessness is a viable path because it's a powerful antidote that directly counteracts the self-grasping ignorance, the ignorance that grasps at true existence, and directly, by eliminating that ignorance directly, then eliminates dukkha. Okay, so understanding this eliminates the misconception that the wisdom realizing selflessness is not a path to liberation. Okay, so it confirms for us it is a path, it is a reliable path, there is a path. Okay. And then third, the wisdom directly realizing selflessness is accomplishment because it unmistakably realizes the nature of the mind. Okay, so unlike worldly paths, like, states of deep meditative absorption, that because these worldly paths cannot accomplish our ultimate goal, unlike those, the wisdom directly realizing emptiness leads us to unmistaken spiritual attainments. So this wisdom is accomplishment because it accomplishes those attainments. It accomplishes the true cessations that we seek. Okay, so it's an unmistaken path, and this counteracts the misconception that worldly paths eliminate dukkha. In other words, the misconception that, let's say, any of the things that so many other people teach, that deep samadhi eliminates dukkha, that propitiating a certain deity eliminates dukkha, that, so it eliminates those kind of wrong conceptions. Fourth, the wisdom directly realizing selflessness is deliverance because it brings irreversible liberation. Okay, so this, when we have this wisdom realizing selflessness, and it eliminates the different layers of afflictions and different layers of dukkha, we attain those true cessations that themselves are irreversible. So this path is really deliverance because it leads to those irreversible states of, it leads to irreversible liberation. So once you've attained liberation, you can't lose it again. Because once you've eliminated ignorance from the root, there's nothing that can cause the ignorance to come back in the mind. Until we've eliminated ignorance from the root, the ignorance can come again. But once we've eliminated it through this wisdom, because the wisdom realizes the opposite of what ignorance holds. Yeah, so it directly counteracts ignorance. Because of this, then the afflictions can be eradicated forever, and true liberation attained, and we never fall from that. Okay? So that eliminates the misconception that, the path is mistaken, or that the path leads to a state of liberation that's only temporary. Okay. We did all 16 aspects. Yeah? Yes?
Remember, you used the word selflessness in the station in the past. It's the same meaning as
Here, if you describe it according to the Prasangika view, yes. Selflessness and emptiness have the same meaning. Okay?
And then in the truth of origin,
In the what?
in the suffering of origin.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
So the originator, which is one of the aspects, you're referring that as together with the cause as well.
I didn't understand.
So you have the cause and also the origination, right? As the aspect.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's two different aspects. One is cause, one is origin. Yeah. Okay, so the thing is, with these different aspects, they're pointing out that's what they are, is they're aspects. They're showing us different ways to regard that particular truth, different aspects of that truth. Okay, yeah. Oh.
Which is also caused by craving and
Yeah, craving and karma are the example that's used. Yeah. And then the aspect is, because all these 16 are syllogisms. Yeah, if you study reasoning, they're all syllogism. So, okay, let's go back to that one. Okay, craving and karma are the causes of dukkha, because due to them, dukkha constantly occurs. So craving and karma are the example of dukkha. They're the subject of the syllogism. And they are causes of the dukkha. That's the thesis, what you're trying to prove. Why those are the causes of dukkha? Why? Because due to craving and karma, dukkha constantly exists. That's the reason. Okay? Yeah?
Could you go to the fourth one of that, true origins?
True origins, yeah. Okay. Craving and karma are conditions because they act as the cooperative conditions that give rise to suffering.
And then the thing that it counteracts. The thing about
Oh, what it counteracts? Okay. It counteracts the idea that dukkha is fundamentally permanent but temporarily fleeting. Okay? Because if suffering were permanent and eternal, it couldn't be affected by other factors, and thus it could not be counteracted. Okay? So understanding that dukkha depends on causes and conditions, and that those causes and conditions can be eliminated, shows us that dukkha can be ceased. Yeah? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Well, you're saying that the wisdom directly realizing emptiness counters the idea that there is no path to liberation.
Yeah.
So until we have that direct realization, we're always going to be plagued by
well, okay. They say that it's only when you realize emptiness directly that your doubt is cut off from the root. Okay? However, doubt there's many levels and types of doubt. Okay? So as we practice, and especially as we learn about emptiness, and as we gain first a correct assumption about emptiness, then later an inference about emptiness, those are very strong things that oppose the doubt. So it isn't that you have doubt or wrong views up until the 1 second before you realize emptiness directly. Yeah. You go from wrong views to doubt, from doubt to correct assumption, from correct assumption to inference, from inference to direct perception. Okay? Yeah.
So I'm having a little hard time of discerning the difference between the third and the fourth level truth, because it seems to me that the path is realizing emptiness, but that's like the answer to the problem.
Okay.
So it's like, how does that
Okay, you can see it this way. True cessations are the destination you're going, and the wisdom realizing emptiness is the path that's going to take you there. Okay?
And where do we like find that? I guess. I mean, I know like the Dharma, but is there like step one?
Step 1, follow the Lam Rim. The Lam Rim is called stages of the path. You start at the beginning and go through. Okay? Yeah. Sometimes we need some introduction to the Lam Rim. You know, Westerners don't always have the worldview associated with the Lam Rim, so often we need some introductory steps before we get it. But if we, really start practicing that way, then we'll get there.